Don't kill the messenger. But Netflix's Avatar: The Last Airbender Season 2 may have done some things better than the original series. Hi, if you're new here, my name is Sable and I talk about comics and all things nerdy. Netflix's Avatar: The Last Airbender Season 2 just dropped, and of course, it has been amassing lots and lots and lots of hate. This is no surprise because most live actions are just not very good, and Netflix might be the king of bad adaptations. Now, Season 1 of this adaptation was not very good. I'll be the first to admit that I had lots of complaints. I really liked the casting of this show, which I think has so far been the strongest part of this adaptation, but the characterization of the gang has been pretty abysmal. I myself did not like the way they did season 1 Katara. I think she was the most watered down, no pun intended, nerfed character that was brought to this live action. And of course, the show has taken liberties with the story in ways that sometimes made sense and a lot of times did not. But season 2 came back, and while it may not be perfect, it is by far a huge leap in the right direction. We have the addition of Toph and a slew of other changes that I think work well in some ways and in some others did not. But we're going to break down the major ones in this video. And of course, if it's not obvious already, spoiler alert. Normally in a video like this, I'd go right into talking about what's bad with the show because I like to end with the positives at the end of the video. But because I made such a wild claim at the beginning of this video, I think I should back that up first with what works in season 2 before talking about what didn't work. First thing that works and works well, works beautifully is Suki. Now, Suki was a beloved character in the original animation, and a lot of people were happy with her adaptation in season 1. She is one of the bright spots of season 1, and that continues. What makes this Suki great and perhaps even better than the animated series is that she truly feels integral to the gang, to the show, and to the mission in general. The Kyoshi warriors, while they weren't important in the animated series, here they feel like things would not be able to get done without them. Suki and the Kyoshi warriors are indispensable in this show, and they're really building up her relationship with other members of the gang outside of Sokka. We see her have interactions with Katara. We see her have interactions with Aang. And of course, a great interaction with Sokka that I'll go into more in a second. But I like the fact that they do this because Avatar: The Last Airbender as a franchise has always been really weird with Suki. I talked about how in the animated movie that's supposed to come out in October but was leaked online, barely has her in it. In fact, she's really only a cameo character. And it just feels very weird, like they don't know what to do with her. They don't want her to be considered a main part of the group, yet they know they can't completely sideline her, and they've even given her her own comic book. So it's very funny the way ATLA treats Suki. But this show makes a very bold statement when it comes to Suki, and that she's not going anywhere, and that the gang needs her to survive. And like I said, her relationship with the gang is such a breath of fresh air, especially her relationship with Sokka, because with Sokka in the animated series, they had a good relationship, but there wasn't always time to really develop their romance. And this is true for a lot of the relationships in the animated series. I've always been of the mind that the relationship aspect of Avatar has always been the weakest. It has great storytelling, it has great action, it has great art, it has great world building, it has 10 out of 10s for everything except for romance. And this adaptation does a much better job, I think, with their romance, especially the grief that Sokka feels after Yue. We see that Sokka is affected by Yue in the animated series long after she passes away in season 1. And I really like that. I like the fact that they don't just drop it. I like the fact that he carries that along with him throughout the rest of the series, and it causes tension between him and Suki. This adaptation doubles down on it, and you really see how he's pushing Suki away because he doesn't want to see her get hurt, because he feels like he failed Yue. And the grief that he feels is understandable. and it really helps round out Sokka's character as opposed to just being the comic relief, which is something that adaptations tend to do with the quote unquote comic relief character when they're not really in tune with the other aspects of that character. The animated series was great at making sure Sokka was not just the jokes guy, and I think Netflix's version is continuing on with that theme. But like I said, what's really great about this adaptation is the way that they handle grief. None of the characters are unscathed when it comes to this war and the toll that it's taking on them. Sokka is really affected not only by his loss of Yue, but also the loss of his mom. And him and Katara have a moment where they realize that they haven't been talking about their grief over their mother together. And I think that's a very sweet addition because we know from the animated series that Katara is very affected by her mother's death, and the show explains this to us multiple times, but we don't see too many instances of Sokka really talking about it. Of course he does, don't get me wrong, but normally they both talk about their mom to other characters. This show really has them talking about their mom's death to each other and promising to be there for each other as they navigate this grief. And I thought that that was such a great moment. Speaking of Katara, the third thing that I really like that this adaptation has done is upped the game with Katara from season one. Is she still like her animated counterpart? So so, but season one really seemed to tone down her rage, her feistiness, and I did not like that at all because if you know from the show, Katara is very outspoken. She's very opinionated and she doesn't want to be a healer. She wants to be a fighter. And I felt like the adaptation in season one didn't really tap into that well. But season two, all that is out the window because we see Katara and she is scrapping like we know she's supposed to. Now, obviously, the bending is going to be held back by the special effects. Is it better? 100%. But you're still not going to get the same type of action sequences you would have gotten from the TV show. And that's okay here because they're doing their best. And you can see that they're truly putting in way more effort when it comes to the bending. And Katara's water bending looks super fantastic in a lot of the scenes, especially the scene at the end where she has to make the water octopus. I love that scene, and I think they did a good job with it in the adaptation. And surprisingly, I also like the fact that they did bring the Painted Lady to season two. Now, in the animated series, the Painted Lady makes an appearance in season three and for only one episode. But here they brought it in early in Katara's character because she wants to help the people of Ba Sing Se, which I actually think works well because they spend so much time in Ba Sing Se, both in the animated series and in this live adaptation. It makes sense for Katara to be helping those in need in an area she's going to be in for quite some time. Now, I've seen a lot of people online complaining about this adaptation of The Painted Lady, and honestly, I really don't think that they've taken the time to actually watch the adaptation because the complaints that I'm hearing about The Painted Lady being the moment in Katara's character arc where she starts to care about people in the Fire Nation who have been unfairly affected by the war still applies here. I'm hearing people say that it does not respect this pivotal moment in Katara's character, and I really don't think that that's fair. Because, like I said, it's really only for one episode she dresses up as the Painted Lady to help a village that's being destroyed by the Fire Nation. The same thing is happening here, but it's not a changing point in Katara's character, in my opinion. I think it's just an expression of her character. She's compassionate, she cares about people. Like she says in the show, she's never going to turn her back on those who are in need. And this season two adaptation touches into that. And if anything, we get to see the Painted Lady even more than we did in the animated series. So I don't think that this is a pain point. Like I said, there are changes that I don't think should have been made, but I don't think this is one of them. If anything, I felt like the Painted Lady brought more out of Katara that we needed to see from season one. And I like the tension that it brought between her and Aang. I've heard complaints about the way that Aang reacts to Katara's Painted Lady as opposed to in the animated series where he's supportive of her. In this season, he's really frustrated because he feels like she's not there and he has time constraints on what he needs to do, and he feels like Katara is taking time away to do things outside of their main mission. Now, whether or not you like this change, I can see both sides of the spectrum and I can see why people like it. I can see why people don't like it. But the truth is that it creates tension, and tension for a show, especially like this, is necessary. We need moments where the gang doesn't get along. We need moments where they disagree with each other. And if anything, We need to see Aang and his flaws in moments like this. Was he wrong? Absolutely. But he sees the error in his ways and he apologizes. And I think an Aang that makes mistakes like this and needs to apologize to his friends for what he says and does out of moments of frustration is necessary, is needed, because we see this tension in the animated series when Appa gets stolen. Aang starts bugging out and he starts lashing out at his friends. Because Appa going missing does not happen until later on in this season, there are other areas in which we need to see Aang having tension with his friends. And I think this was a good way of writing around that to create that tension and therefore create a stronger bond afterwards. So I like this change. And my fourth point, I also like the change to Iroh. Now, Iroh is a character who is universally loved from the animated series, universally loved. But one of the complaints about the animated series is that Iroh doesn't really get any consequences from his involvement in the war. Obviously, he loses his son, but other than that, the show doesn't really treat Iroh like a war criminal. This show does. Not only does Iroh have to face the grief of losing his son, he also has to face his actions of what he did and how he attacked Ba Sing Se and how he killed hundreds of people. And the show does not just easily forgive him for that. And Zuko does not just easily forgive him for that. And I like that. I like the fact that Iroh also has to face with his own demons. One of them being in his interaction with Zuko, how him giving up the throne, running away from his responsibilities, caused problems for Zuko. And I loved this scene. I loved this interaction because I never really thought about the trickle effect of Iroh's decisions on Zuko. We know Ozai is the villain, but Ozai would have never been in power had Iroh not given it up. Had Iroh not ran from his responsibilities, which is something that we normally associate with Aang doing, Zuko's life would have looked completely different. And I think that is super important to explore. And I like the fact that the show does this. Now, people complain because the show does not adapt the scene in which Iroh confronts Zuko after Zuko steals Appa. And we have that iconic line of, it's time to look inward and start asking yourself the big questions. Who are you and what do you want? Chef kiss of a scene. We don't have that in the Netflix adaptation. But I think that this interaction with Iroh and Zuko may not be on the same level, but it definitely has the same depth if you really, really, truly take time and think about it. Think about what they're saying to each other and how they have to forgive each other for what they've done and the part that they've played in the war. Loved it. Last but not least, I can say I think the most universally accepted positive about season two was the addition of Toph. I don't really have much to say here, but yes, she's a great character and the actress does a great job of playing Toph. She felt very real and rounded to me. And I love seeing the more nuanced conflict she has with her family. In the show, we see that Toph runs away from her parents and she just runs away from this stuffy life. But in this adaptation, we see more of why she hates her family name, why of more she has issues with them, more of why she wants to reject this lifestyle. And even Toph getting proposals at what is probably still a very young age just goes to show just how stifling her environment is and why she wants so much to break free. While I'm not crazy about the scene in which Aang finally earthbends, I feel like it was a little bit unearned. We still have their connection, we still have them pushing each other, and I think that's good. And I think that their relationship has been well defined for the show moving forward. Now, moving on to what I don't really like about season two, I have to start off with the acting. The acting in this show is very, very, very mediocre. I hate to say that. I really, really do, because I know that these are young actors, actresses, probably early projects for them. But the acting, sometimes it really gives Disney Channel style acting. And I feel like they are capable of more, especially because characters like Azula and Katara, I think that those actresses got more comfortable in their role as the show has been going on. They are different than how they were in season one, especially Azula. Even Aang's actor, I feel like he's just settling more into the role, but the acting in general, I'm not really sure what the director is trying to get out of them, but it doesn't really feel like they're being given notes, if that makes sense. It feels like they're being told to go out there and just act the lines without really coaching them on how to make the scene better. I hope that the acting gets better, but it is what it is for right now. And the same could also be said about the pacing of this show. Season 2 was only 7 episodes. And they had to adapt from the animated show, which I think season 2 was over 20 something episodes. So the pacing can feel a little bit rushed at times. Now, as somebody who's watched the animated show numerous times, I already know what's happening and I know what to expect. But for somebody who's coming in for the first time, I would assume that they may not always understand why certain decisions are being made because the show can't really explain it. It has to keep moving on. It doesn't really explain too much what Jet's motivations are currently. It doesn't really say too much why Zuko is once again becoming the blue spirit. Like, these are things that I think if you watch the animated series, you know why it's happening, but I don't think the show is doing a great job of explaining the motivations behind some of the character actions. Even Aang's relationship with Long Feng, I feel like the show explains more why Long Feng is important more than what this adaptation is saying. We see more of Long Feng and the Dai Li and Judy and how all of this works around the Earth King in the animated show. But in this adaptation, we're just told that this is how it is, but we're not really told why. And perhaps it may not be that important to a first time viewer, but I feel like you lose a lot of the nuance and the political world building of Avatar when you rush these type of scenes. Last but not least, my biggest gripe with this season is something that is not really in anyone's control, but it's felt, and that's the age gap between season 1 and season 2. Aang is growing up. How he looks in season 1 versus how he looks now, older, voice getting deeper. It's a visible change, and the show has no choice but to acknowledge that. However, I'm now conflicted as to what the timeline is because Toph makes a comment to Aang saying that no wonder it took you years to learn waterbending. But we know from the animated show that Aang had to do all of this in under a year. So I'm not really sure as to how much time has passed. Maybe I missed it, but it doesn't really feel like the show wants to nail down a timeline because the kids are still growing up. And by the time season 3 comes around, who knows what they're going to look and sound like. I feel like, unfortunately, the show has to contend with their growing actors and bring it into the storyline, but they're not explaining to the viewer how much time between season 1 and 2 has passed. I feel like they're intentionally trying to be vague about it. Normally, I wouldn't mind, but the Avatar animated show is very specific on all of these events taking place under a year to emphasize the sense of urgency that the gang is under. I don't know if we have that here. I don't know what the urgency is. We do know that they have to defeat the Fire Lord before the comet arrives. We do still have the Day of Black Sun coming, but I don't know if this is still taking place in 1 year or if this has been a couple of years now. And I do think that that's an important distinction that the show should make. But once again, it's really out of everyone's control, and we kind of just have to accept it. All in all, like I said, I actually enjoyed season 2 way more than I did season 1. I think it's a step in the right direction, and I think it's more enjoyable if you think of it less as a one-to-one adaptation and more of a retelling or a reimagining because we hit the important plot points. We still hit the important moments in the story. We just have a different way of getting there. And I think that that's still worth checking out because if I wanted to see Avatar again, I would just watch the animated series. When I watch the Netflix adaptation, I like to see the changes that they make because it makes me think about the existing material in a whole different way and branches out new conversations, which we should all enjoy because we have talked about Avatar to death. So why not have some discourse over some new material? All things that I think you need to experience for yourself to form your own opinion on whether or not you think this is a good reimagining of Avatar or not. But let me know what you think.